There was a time when the sound of someone fixing something in the next room meant more than the repair itself, though most of us didn't understand that until much later. You'd hear the soft clatter of tools being laid out on a newspaper, the low hum of concentration, maybe a muttered curse when a screw rolled under the couch, and you knew, without anyone saying a word, that this was how some people showed they cared, not with big speeches or grand gestures, but with their hands wrapped around a stubborn hinge, a frayed wire, a toy whose wheel had gone crooked. They didn't call it love, of course. Back then, love didn't always come dressed in the language we use now. It appeared in little acts, in patience, in the quiet persistence of trying to make a broken thing whole again. Fixing things was never just about saving money, though that was part of it. Most families couldn't afford to replace everything that gave up the ghost. You kept what you had going for as long as it would let you. The toaster that sometimes burned on one side, the lamp that flickered like it had opinions, the kettle that whistled off-key. Everything had quirks, and instead of tossing them out, you learned them the way you learn a person's habits. You got used to giving the radio a thump on the side to clear the static. You knew which chair squeaked if you sat down too fast. You learned how to jiggle the key just right in the lock. There was affection in that familiarity, though no one thought to name it. And when something finally did break, truly break, not the usual misbehaving, you felt it like a little loss. The adults gathered around as if paying respects, someone sighing as they flipped it over, assessing its fate. Then the ritual began. The screws came out. The back panel was removed. Out spilled a lifetime of dust and tiny mysteries. There was a kind of reverence in that moment, in opening a thing up to see what had gone wrong. Not everything could be fixed, but everything deserved the attempt. You learned a lot just by watching. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, while someone older, a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, who smelled faintly of Fenton grease, worked in that quiet, focused way that didn't ask for applause. Their hands might have been rough from work, their glasses sliding down their nose as they leaned in closer to inspect some fragile wire or spring, and you could tell they were in their element. People talk now about flow state, like it's some new invention, but they had it long before the term existed. There was a peacefulness in the way they patched, glued, sanded, or tightened. The world shrank down to the thing in front of them, and for that little stretch of time, nothing else mattered. Some fixes were triumphs. A toy car that lived again. A record player coaxed back to life. A wooden drawer that stopped sticking after a rub of candle wax. Other fixes were temporary, a bandage solution, everyone fully aware it wouldn't last forever, but grateful for the extension. And some attempts ended in silence. A small shake of the head, a soft, "I've done what I can." You learn to accept that too, that not everything can be saved, that effort itself has dignity. What stays with you now isn't the repaired object, most of those are long gone, but the feeling of being cared for in the background. Someone noticed the loose wheel on your bike and tightened it without telling you. Someone fixed the lamp in your room because you squinted while reading. Someone stitched the rip in your school uniform so neatly you could hardly tell it had ever torn. None of it came with speeches or declarations. It was simply part of how people tended to one another. And maybe it's why so many people now find themselves missing something they can't quite name. We've become a world of replacements, faster, cheaper, easier. Things aren't designed to last, and neither, it sometimes feels, are our gestures. A broken appliance gets tossed. A cracked screen becomes an excuse for a whole new phone. Even relationships thread through convenience, messages darting back and forth with the speed of impatience, everything disposable if it requires too much work. There's a quiet sadness in that, though no one likes to admit it, because repairing something teaches you a kind of tenderness. You have to pay attention. You have to understand how it works, where it strains, what it needs. You look closely. You take your time. You commit to the process, even when it's fiddly or frustrating. And in doing so, you create a small pocket of intimacy with the object, with the moment, with the person you're doing it for. When you grew up around people who lived this way, you learned that care wasn't always loud or poetic. Sometimes it was just the soft click of a toolbox latch and the smell of old timber and oil. And if you're honest, you can probably still picture those hands, the ones that fixed your bike, your toys, your wobbly bookshelf. You remember the way they held things gently, almost reverently, even if the hands themselves were strong or worn. You remember the sighs, the muttered commentary, the satisfaction when something snapped back into place. You didn't need to be told you were loved. It was right there in the workbench clutter, the jars of screws sorted by size, the drawer full of rubber bands and stray washers, the willingness to keep trying until the thing, or the day, was a little better than before. Maybe that's why the memory feels so heavy now, in a warm kind of way, because it reminds you of a world where care was built into the daily fabric, unannounced and uncelebrated. A world where fixing things wasn't just a skill or a necessity, but a language of its own, quiet, steady, humble, spoken by people who showed love not with words, but with their hands, with their time, with their decision to give something broken another chance. And maybe the real reason we look back on it with a lump in the throat isn't because we want the old appliances or the old tools or even the old ways of doing things. What we miss, perhaps, is that kind of love, the kind you didn't have to hear to feel, the kind that arrived in the form of a mended hinge or a working lamp or a toy made whole again. The kind that said, without ever saying it, "You matter enough for me to take the time."